It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Opening night is Thursday night in the Canadian Football League, and we can't be more excited to see what's going to happen over the next 21, 22 weeks and 81 games of Canadian football. Heath, before we get to any of that prognostication and anything else that at least I tend to get completely wrong, let's talk about other major events that have happened in the last 7 days. Specifically, the commissioner came through and got a television deal before the start of the season.
Commissioner Stewart Johnston in under the wire with his announcement, but something that we've talked about a lot over the last couple of years, every time there was mention of the new media deal, we talked about the importance of streaming, what that was going to look like. That is part of this media deal. So TSN has re-upped, and RDS as the English and French broadcast network of the CFL, but they have also partnered with DAZN to host Saturday Night Football. So the Saturday 7 Eastern games starting in 2027 are going to be exclusively on DAZN. For those unfamiliar with this service, they launched in Canada 9 years ago in 2017 and made a big splash at that time because they had exclusive broadcast rights to English Premier League soccer was the big one that launched them in Canada. They've been around. They have a lot of major sporting events and seem to be very excited to have CFL as part of their package.
They are a worldwide presence as well. They are available in 200 markets across the globe. So that means that everywhere anyone can pretty much get to this. And if you look at the call letters, DAZN, that's where you get DAZN from. So if you're looking for the app, it'll typically have DAZN as its moniker sitting across it when you're looking for it. The big change, of course, is that exclusivity that TSN has enjoyed since 2008 is no longer a part of their package. It also means, too, that there's going to be a different paywall or purchase price to watch Saturday football in the Canadian Football League, and that is with DAZN. Now, as we record, that price point is roughly $25 for the standard package, and the higher end package is $29 per month. Divide that by a game a week, you're paying about $6.50 to $7 per, let's say $7.25 if you're paying for the high end package per football game. How many football games can you get into for that price at any level?
Well, and that's the pricing of the current structure. There was a very good interview by Justin Dunk on 3 Down Nation with Deidre Dion, who is the Canadian vice president for DAZN. They have not set pricing for CFL football yet. They're looking at market research, all of the different data to see if they are going to specifically have a CFL package available or if it's going to be part of the regular subscription service. We won't know that until 2027. They've got a lot of things to figure out. This is new for them. As I mentioned, they are excited to have this package available. They do have game rights to NFL games already. So this is just a natural fit into their football package. And we'll see how everything shakes down. As I mentioned earlier, we've talked about this ad nauseum when we're discussing the new media deals. And for years, stalwart CFL fans, diehard fans have been talking about the need to diversify, the need to reach new audiences, be creative, attract a younger audience. And I think this does that. Yes, it's behind a paywall, but let's not forget, when TSN started broadcasting exclusively, they're a paid cable station as well. That is a paywall in a sense.
You're exactly right. And if you want the TSN app, you have that other paywall to get through. You still get 60 of the 81 games on regular TV. That is going to be TSN Thursdays and Fridays. And then that 7 o'clock time slot, which is a given for DAZN, that's going to be theirs. And they also get 2 games in the playoffs, the first 2 games of the playoffs. They will have a lot of effort invested. And already, if you look at the DAZN, DAZN, or the DAZN app, and you check out what they're promoting, it's Canadian football. They are excited. They want to push this. And I think it's going to help everybody. And we've said it on this podcast many a times, having a second partner broadcasting the game is going to up everyone's game because best practices.
They have already spoken about having new voices. They're going to have their own panel, their own play-by-play and sideline teams as well. So it will give things a little bit of a different look. And for those people that understandably don't necessarily want to invest in another subscription service, I understand 100% where they're coming from. There are other ways to get this game content. And we've had some of those people on the podcast: Dave Thomas, Derek Taylor, Morley Scott, Ben Grant, Luke Mullender. These guys are the voice of the CFL on radio. And if your team is playing a Saturday 7 Eastern game and you don't have DAZN, tune into the radio. Listen to those people. They do a fantastic job as well.
You're exactly right. And if you do the math, and I'll give credit to 3 Down Nation for sort of providing some of this impetus, you look at the 9 teams and you look at the number of weeks, you're probably going to have your team that you cheer for locally on a Saturday night anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe 6 times. So that could be 1/6 of their schedule to 1/3 of their schedule. You got to weigh that in terms of what you want to do. And then, of course, you're right. It's another paywall app. It's another service that you have to fork over some money to have. But there's not just CFL on DAZN. You may find that you enjoy other aspects of it. Now, whether it's the CFL content only, or if it's just part of the bigger package of everything so that it's not necessarily a single purchase, but they may have an incentive too. They may knock the price down a little bit to get you there and say, if you sign up through the CFL, you may save $3 to $5 a month.
I was engaging with some Blue Bomber fans earlier today about this situation and about losing some of these games. If this was in effect for the 2026 schedule, there was only 2 Winnipeg Blue Bomber games that are Saturday night at 7 Eastern, week 18 and week 19. So that's only 2 games that affect that particular fan base. It's not going to be it's not like Hockey Night in Canada where the Leafs are on Saturday night on CBC. If you were a Leafs fan and they took that away and put it behind a paywall, I could understand some frustration there because you're going to lose a lot of those games. When this announcement first came out and I saw DAZN was the streaming service, my initial thought was, well, it's too bad it's not on one of the streaming services I already subscribe to. But at the end of the day, it's setting a priority, and maybe I cancel one of the other subscription services for the duration of a CFL season so that I do have access to all of those games that are going to be on DAZN. We, as hosts of this broadcast, do our best to make sure that we are seeing every CFL game in the regular season to keep track of things. This is a sacrifice that I'm willing to make in order to get that. And I'm excited to see what new voices DAZN brings to the table.
And also what feel they bring, what kind of excitement they bring, and how does TSN respond to it? The overall feeling that I get from this, other than the revenue streams, which will help every CFL team, and let's say, just for sake of argument, as I, again, attribute it to 3 Down Nation, that teams are going to make an extra $3 to $4 million a season because of this television and streaming contract that they've just signed. It's a win for the CFL, and I would say it's going to be a win for both partners that are broadcasting this game, because we are into a new era of the CFL. 2026, this is it. This is the last of the CFL that we've known for, let's say, 100 years. It's coming to a close, but it's not abandoning everything that it ever was. So much of it is still the same. It's just certain aspects of the game are going to change.
There's an old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. And as you said, it's going to bring some new voices and some new innovation. Every time we've seen different broadcast partners in any of the major sports in North America, they have brought some innovation to the table. Things like the spider cam that goes over the field. You look at auto racing where they've got the infield camera coming out of the grass, a great shot of the the cars going by. That was an innovation that Fox brought to NASCAR broadcasts. Baseball with a camera in a different spot to see different things. These are the types of innovations. So I'm really excited to see what DAZN brings in broadcasting these games, in panels, halftime. All of those things are going to be different, and it's going to force TSN to not become complacent in what they do.
You're exactly right. And I'm thinking too, you talked about paywalls and we said, what if, but if you want to watch regional hockey with Rogers in Canada, you have to sign up to that channel. That's an extra cost to you. If you want to watch baseball on certain channels, you have to sign up and you have to pay for it. This is nothing new, and this is the way the world is going. Even the NFL has gone that way with Amazon. If you don't have Amazon, well, luckily in Canada, TSN rebroadcasts it, so we're okay. But if you're in the States, you've got to have Amazon to watch Thursday Night Football. And they've also put games on Netflix. That's another service that you have to pay for. So there's a lot of belief systems out there that the market is moving this way. And for Stewart Johnston, I commend him getting in there, but keeping it at a manageable size. Not saying all 81 and the playoffs are gone, just portions of it are moving to a different service. Get everybody adapted.
Adding on to what you said about the NFL is, yes, they broadcast exclusive games on Prime, content on Netflix, NBC, Peacock, CBS, FS1, ESPN, Fox. The list goes on. They are in about 8 or 9 different locations. Even Nickelodeon has games in the NFL broadcast scope. So anybody that's saying they don't know how to find DAZN or they're concerned about the splitting of the broadcasts, the NFL is the sports juggernaut in North America. They've spread themselves across 8 different platforms. People can still find the games. And if you want to follow it, there's a way to do it.
Well, the CFL forever was CBC and CTV. TSN comes on board. CTV owns TSN. They back out of the way, let TSN take over. But it was TSN and CBC until 2008 when TSN takes over. You talk about missing a couple of games too, and it just twigged me just now. We used to have blackouts. There were games that were never shown anywhere. You could be, I am 3 hours north of Regina, but I couldn't see the Rough Riders play at home if, for whatever reason, that they felt that television was actually diminishing attendance. So they said, no, we're not going to chance this. And then they would maybe lift the blackout for Labor Day because it sold out so early. And that sort of changed the thinking. Now, the Argonauts and the Ticats were way ahead. They lifted their blackouts years before. But in Southern Ontario through the 70s and 80s, you couldn't watch either of them play.
And case in point, the search for footage of Matt Dunnigan's 713-yard passing game, it was missing for 30 years because it was not broadcast on television anywhere. The fact that we have this access, there was also games that were played simultaneously, so you didn't even have the choice of being able to see every single game for a time as well. You had to pick and choose which one you wanted to see because of those conflicts. The CFL has come a long way in how they broadcast their sport and have made it accessible to everybody. This is just one more step to it. And we haven't even really dug into this agreement with YouTube that is coming down the line as well. There hasn't been a lot of detail on it yet, but there's been talk of some original content, some unscripted behind the scenes looks at the CFL, as well as making more content readily available. Hopefully this also leads to partnerships, or not necessarily partnerships, but understanding with content creators, be it podcasters or people that have archives of old games, old interviews that they want to share. The CFL is in a position where they can work together with all of these people to help make content more available. That's going to drive more people to the games.
That's exactly where I was going to go to next when you talked about YouTube. CFL Classics. There's a person that is out of pocket trying to bring back old games, paying to have them digitized and then put them up. And so you've got a selection of games all the way back to the 60s on that channel. Now, if you're the CFL, you can either say, wait a minute, or you could say, wow, And I think of NFL Throwback with the NFL. NFL Throwback is a channel which is fantastic. The NFL could have jumped all over them, but they realized how good it was, and they said, "No, let's work with them." So you've got some great content creators. Instead of being annoyed, go out there, reach out your hand, give them a shake, and say, "How can we help you?" And let's build this together. And if that means that CFL Classics gets folded in to the CFL channel so that you could watch CFL Classic games on the CFL YouTube channel, more power. Let's do it.
And it comes down to whether or not the CFL wants to take this on themselves or their current broadcast partners. If TSN isn't interested in sharing this content, if the CFL isn't interested in putting it up on their website or paying somebody to do it, if there are fans and volunteers that are willing and excited to do this work, share it out, build those connections, allow more people to engage with more content.
The biggest issue typically with showing a game is what kind of revenue stream are you giving up if you have the rights to it? And the CFL, to their credit so far, has never worried about anything that's done a long time ago. It's way back in the past. You're going to get a certain number of people watching it, but is it enough to promote advertising, to generate that kind of revenue that you think you're losing by having that out there instead of you taking care of it? I don't think that really matters. What really matters is the fact that when you go to YouTube, if I type in CFL games, there's a bunch out there, and I can look back at some heroes that I knew as a kid. I can look at some classic games. There's everything that you hopefully want, and hopefully we get more of these games, that more people dig in their basements, find a film, find a VCR tape, and put out more of this stuff so that we can see even more classic football games. That helps the CFL in so many ways.
Speaking of more, also in the announcements this week, Commissioner Stu Johnston is bullish on expansion and would love to see more CFL teams, possibly a 10th team by 2030.
That is a lofty goal, and we know exactly what is going to be discussed. And that is it going to be another bid by Atlantic Canada to bring football to Halifax? It seems to be that the biggest opportunity is a $1.5 billion development that's in the offing in the Halifax area.
It is. They're looking at building a stadium and entertainment district near the Halifax airport. This is a little bit of a drive from Halifax, Dartmouth. It's about 20 minutes outside of the city. You'll have to look at the logistics of moving that many people on game days, what that means, but it is a proposal that is in place. The other possible landing spot is Quebec City, and that one has gained a little bit more momentum in recent years. The Atlantic Schooners Halifax has been tossed around now for about 45 years.
Since 1984.
So just over 40 years. So there's been peaks and valleys of the rumors and the desire to have a team in Halifax. Now Quebec City is possibly in the mix as well. We need to get to 10 first, but if we get to 10 and both of those markets are interested, are 11 and 12 close behind?
I would think that for the interim, 10 is where they want to go. They want to hit that mark and hang in there and just see how this develops. Now, Jacques Tanguay, who is the Laval Rouge et Or president, and for our American friends and those outside of Canada, Laval Rouge et Or is a university team that's sort of independent of the university because their funding comes through different sources, but they use the university name and they play with the university colors. They have been a dominant team in U Sport football in Canada for the last 30 years, ever since they came about. And they know how to run things. And when they say that they're interested, I listen because they know what they're doing. And Quebec City is a couple hours away from Montreal. It's another hour or so away from Ottawa. You've got a natural rivalry built up. It would be fantastic to have two teams in Quebec. That would mean so much for RDS, and it would also solidify the East at 5 teams.
It would. And the biggest deterrent right now is the stadium. The current stadium where the Laval Rouge et Or play is not conducive to a CFL crowd. There would need to be some work done. That's why Halifax has maybe leapt ahead again in that race because of the stadium proposal. It still needs to be approved, obviously designed and built, but there is a proposal in place. So we'll have to keep an eye on both of those markets to see what happens. Quebec City is intriguing. If you look back to the 80s and early 90s, when the Quebec Nordique were playing in Quebec City and, of course, the Montreal Canadiens, that was a rivalry within that province. It was a lot of fun to watch. And since the Nordique moved to Denver, we've lost a little bit of that. So to see something like that come back and get the interest throughout the province of Quebec would be a huge win.
It would be a win-win for the province, and it would be a win for the CFL. It really, as you say, comes down to stadium. But I would also think, and as with the Halifax situation, it probably means some build-up economically of entertainment or business or living accommodations in the neighborhood, such that you actually have a redevelopment of the whole area, not just putting in a stadium, so that you make it more viable. Winnipeg and Regina maybe went the other way with their latest moves, but most others now are trying to tie in something with it, as they did in Ottawa with their renovations.
It's the enhancement of the fan experience. And yes, Princess Auto Stadium at the University of Manitoba grounds in Winnipeg is a little bit towards the outside of the city. Not a lot of entertainment options around, but you look at the downtown arena in Winnipeg, the Canada Life Center, when it was being built, and True North Sports and Entertainment has developed an entertainment district around that downtown arena. Those are the types of things. So maybe it didn't work for the CFL, but the NHL facility it certainly has. We're looking at the proposals in Calgary with replacing the Saddle Dome. That's all going to tie in. It's the wave of the future is to make it not just a destination for a game or a concert, but a destination for your dining and entertainment needs all wrapped up into one area.
Part of the change for 2026 was the 35-second clock. And it was kind of sold on the idea that it would improve pace of play, that the game would be quicker, and hopefully, at least I was left with the impression that we'd have more actual football plays in a game. Well, through the preseason, and granted this is the preseason, that hasn't been the case. The number of plays per game has settled in at 143.67 if you take the 9 games and divide into the total number of plays. In 2017, it was 153.3, and that was with the old rules, the old everything. There's been a steady and incremental decline of numbers of plays per game every year. And this 143 is even lower than what it was last year in the CFL, which came in at 144.7, which is a drop from 146 in 2024. This is not a good trend, because you want to score, you need plays. You cut down the number of plays, tougher to score.
No, you're comparing 2024 and 25 regular season data versus 2026 preseason data. A little bit of apples to oranges there. We were in attendance at Griffith Stadium to see the game between the Blue Bombers and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and we noticed sitting in the stands that there seemed to be a delay of sometimes up to 5 to 7 seconds after a whistle stopping play before that 35-second clock kicked in. The questions that we raised sitting there in the stands were, is this just the timekeepers and the officiating crew getting used to the flow of the new time clock? Is this the standard that there's going to be and sometimes, I should add, it was as quick as 1 to 2 seconds before it kicked in. Is that the norm? Is there going to be a little bit of a delay? Is it because of the massive humanity on the sidelines in preseason games that they allowed a little bit more time to make substitutions? They didn't want anybody to get into that time count violation situation. We did not see any time count violations. There's a few things that we really need to key in on as the regular season starts to see where that goes.
It is apples to oranges in one sense. It's preseason to regular season, but it's still a new implementation of a rule that they thought would help increase the pace of play and increase likely the number of plays. The fact that it's going backwards still, in fact, the lowest was 138. You're not wanting that as the CFL. Now, I know that Darren Hackwood and the rest of the officials at the CFL are going to be looking at this very closely. And as you noted, and we saw, there were delays. They seemed to wait to start the 35-second clock until an official actually got his hand on the football. And I'm not sure that you need to do that. I think if you create the expectation that as the whistle blows, that clock gets reset when that final chirp from that whistle ends, it's 35 seconds from that exact moment, players will get up faster. And if defenses are holding guys to the ground, not letting them move, there are penalties for that.
The model is in place to speed things up dramatically. And exactly what you alluded to is, I think a 1 second delay is reasonable, given that it is a manually operated clock from hearing the whistle to hitting reset on that clock. That's an expectation that is easy to live by. 5, 6, 7 seconds is taking way too long. They need to trim that down. And those are some great questions about when that 35-second clock starts. Is it on the whistle? Is it a second after the whistle? Is it when the officials get the ball? These are all things to watch for and to see how this goes. And I sure hope that it does speed the game up. I anticipated that it would compared to what we've seen in the past, but they need to implement this correctly and hold the players to it.
If you watched the preseason, I don't recall any offense coming up against 0 when they were about ready to snap the ball. They had plenty of time. So if you really want to push this idea of having 35 seconds between plays, then make it absolute. And as soon as you hear the whistle, boop, start that 35-second clock. That's all you're doing is starting that 35-second clock. And if you have to stop it for injury, for an on-field timeout, maybe the officials have to discuss something, you can do that. But don't sit there and wait until, okay, is the official got it? Is the official not? Okay, yep, they do. Yep, now. And suddenly we're into what I railed against a couple of years ago, where the Blue Bombers are running 44 seconds between plays to snap the ball. And it bogged the game right down. Do I think the 35-second clock has improved the rhythm of the play? Absolutely it has. But if it falls into this trap of we don't want to rush the teams, then suddenly we're failing in what we're implementing.
One part of it that I thought rolled out really well, and partially because it isn't a change, was switching back to the 20-second clock on injuries, on timeouts, on measurements, all those sorts of things coming back out of a TV timeout as well. It very easily transitioned back from that 35 to the 20-second. The officiating crews knew what they were doing, and that was very, very smooth.
Yes, anytime there's actual a timeout on the field, whether it's after a score, after a change of possession, measure, all these kind of elements of the game that require the clock to stop, then yes, when you start the 20, you start the game clock with it. It worked beautifully. We've got to be less focused on trying to finish in 2 hours and 45 minutes and more focused on trying to maximize what's going on in the 60 that we're supposed to be playing.
Hi, I'm Dave Naylor, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
Over the past weekend, the CFL teams cut down to their final rosters. A couple of key veterans were cut, and each team averaging probably about 20 players that they have sent packing.
Overall, if you read through all of the cut down lists that happened, the vast majority were import players, or Americans technically, that were released. The odd time you would see a Canadian thrown into the mix, but for the most part, because the recruiting is in the offseason is so heavily done in the United States, bringing players that giving them a chance to try out and see if they can make a team. A lot of these players were on that list. Dylan Wynn, probably the biggest name, I would say, that got released, and that was from Ottawa. Maybe at the end of his career, maybe that's just a sign of the times.
It could be, and the Montreal Alouettes released Canadian quarterback Arnaud Desjardins. We talked a little bit about bringing him into camp and giving him an opportunity. It was unlikely that he was going to stick, but still a Canadian quarterback cut loose. Kendall Randolph, an offensive lineman for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, was another one that was a bit of a surprise. He did start all 18 games with the Bombers last year at right tackle, however, and we know Jarrell Broxton was brought in to bookend with Stanley Bryant on that offensive line. Randolph was given the chance to compete for a guard position as well and couldn't crack the roster. That's a veteran offensive lineman that I would not be surprised to see him land on another roster this season if there's an injury to a starter.
Out of Edmonton, it was Jake Maier who was cut. He was trying to land there with the Toronto Argonauts. Aaron Casey, a linebacker who a lot of people were quite high on. Now, immediately he was snapped up by Ottawa. But overall, in my sort of estimation, there wasn't a name that really grabbed you and said, oh my, I'm surprised that happened.
No, there wasn't. And Jarrett Dagey with the BC Lions is another one that was brought into camp to compete for that backup quarterback role. Chase Bryce had a very good preseason, and obviously the Lions have a lot of confidence in him as their guy. And so somebody with a few starts under their belt in Jarrett Dagey couldn't crack that roster.
And in Calgary, the quarterback that played pretty much the end of the game against the Edmonton Elks, Calgary parts ways with quarterback Jacoby Criswell, who I thought acquitted himself pretty well against Edmonton. Granted, it was second stringers for the Elks at the time, but he still, I felt, took care of the Calgary offense. Now, the fact that he's cut doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to land somewhere else. He could be an interesting sort of pickup for somebody that's looking for a third string quarterback to bring along. The other name that kind of surprised me that wound up on a practice roster was Toronto's former running back Deontay McMahon in Calgary. He didn't make the starting roster, but they kept him on the practice roster.
That one was surprising as well. He shows a lot of promise in what he has done so far in the CFL. Again, you know how important having injury replacements are, and for somebody to be able to step back up if an injury occurs, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get into some games this year.
And then, of course, Terrell Owens, who had we'll call it a storied career in the NFL. His son, Tariq Owens, was trying out with the Montreal Alouettes. It didn't work out at this point in time. The Alouettes also parting ways with James Morgan, who had quarterbacked that team during the regular season last year. Montreal certainly hoping that their star quarterback, Mr. Alexander, is going to be the man. But my goodness, a knee injury coming out of 2 series in the first preseason game. How healthy is he going to be? You just don't want to see him go down. I want to see him play.
Absolutely. And I think everybody does. Dustin Crum is a valuable backup number 2 quarterback in Montreal as well. He's got several starts under his belt, some success as a starting quarterback in this league. I selected Davis Alexander on my fantasy team, so I certainly hope we get 18 starts out of Davis Alexander this year, because he is magical when he's on the field.
He's a leader. That's the biggest thing about him. He's got sort of that no one's going to get past me attitude. I'm going to take this team to where it needs to go. And regardless of how we get there, it's going to happen. He just wants to win at all costs. And those types of people you want leading your football team. Now, Dustin Crum, he's much more laid back, but he is a very hard-nosed player. And the other thing that he is durable. So at least if Alexander is maybe hobbled for opening week, Dustin Crum is going to be available. And it's a step down. The question is how much. And do you read anything into what happened between them and Ottawa in the preseason? Well, the Red Blacks handled the Alouettes 2 times.
You can read the results of a preseason game pretty much any way you want when it comes down to rosters and substitutions and who's playing what. We saw a lot of starting quarterbacks come in for one series, lead their team down the field to a touchdown, pack it in for the rest of the preseason. Trevor Harris and Zach Collaros in the game that we watched played the opening drives, moved the offense, had enough, stood on the sidelines for the rest of the game. So it's giving teams an opportunity to try different scenarios, different sets of players, and really try to evaluate what you do. And it is a very short preseason. We talked a bit in a previous episode about how quickly you're coming out of rookie camp and making your first round of cuts before the pads are even on in the regular camp, and then to only have 2 games to try to evaluate. And even a player that shows promise, you think, well, he had a pretty good series, but he was playing against the other team's 3rd and 4th string defense. What do you read into that?
Exactly. And you look at what Saskatchewan Roughriders did. They kept all 4 quarterbacks that were left in camp. Braden Shager, of course, the pirate, if you want to call him that, the guy that played with one eye and took the Rough Riders to a win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at Griffith Stadium in Saskatoon. I wondered, and we mused about it, is it 2-4 split? Is it Jack Cohn or is it Braden Shager? Who do you keep? Well, the Rough Riders said, we're keeping them both. And the way the new structure is with the roster is that you can keep 2 non-rostered players on the game day roster, if that makes sense. But basically, they're not going to be allowed to play. They're going to be in civvies, but they're going to be paid as if they are rostered players. The Rough Riders saying for one of those 2, that's what's going to happen this year. That was a move that the CFLPA had kind of hoped for. The CFL has agreed to. This is going to change a lot of dynamics. This is going to mean that quarterbacks that typically weren't even anywhere but maybe up in the press box now suddenly are down on the sidelines looking at what's going on. And every time that iPad or Windows notebook or whatever comes out, they'll be sitting there with the starter.
And that is a great move for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They have invested a lot of time and effort into the development of Jack Cohn. Braden Shager kind of came into camp unknown this year and really lit it up. So understandably, they're going to want to keep both of those guys around. Tommy Stevens, the other quarterback on that roster besides Trevor Harris, we know his role on the team, and he's very, very good at those short yardage situations, goal lines, 2nd and short, 3rd and short. He's strong and fast enough that if he gets a step on somebody, he can take those short yardage situations for a big, big gain. So we were pretty confident that he wasn't going anywhere given those intangibles. But to have Cohn and Shager, they're going to continue to evaluate both of those quarterbacks and make the decision that they feel is best. Trevor Harris is 40 years old. To keep both of those guys around competing for the number 1 job in the future isn't a bad thing.
Somebody is going to have to pick up some playing time with Trevor Harris. It's not that it's going to be a given that he's going to get injured, but the trend has been, other than last year, which was the one-off, he's missed parts of seasons for a myriad of reasons. If Trevor Harris stays healthy, that's fantastic for the Rough Riders. But you've got to have, and as Luke Mullender said on a previous podcast, you've got to have somebody that the drop-off isn't that great, that you're ready to go with the next guy. Now, Jake Maier was supposed to be that guy last year with the Rough Riders. He's now wound up with the Ottawa Red Blacks, and he's got the starting job going into the season. Drew Brown, who had been the franchise quarterback, now is relegated to backup.
It's a bit of a surprise given the investment that Ottawa has made in Drew Brown. Now, he did restructure his contract for the 2026 season as well. And the part that isn't as surprising is the history and relationship that Ryan Dinwiddie has with Jake Maier. They were together in Calgary.
Briefly, he recruited Jake Maier to come to the Stampeders, but basically he was gone to Toronto by the time Maier started playing.
He was, but there was some familiarity there as well. Obviously, Ryan Dinwiddie liked what he saw to recruit him in the first place, brought him over to join the Red Blacks organization now that he's at the helm. Again, durability, it's a pretty good situation to have somebody with Drew Brown's talent and experience as your backup, should anything happen to Jake Maier. I guess what's the leash on Jake Maier? I know he's anointed him as the number one guy for now, but to have somebody like Drew Brown in your back pocket, if Maier struggles, you could see a change.
Well, the one thing that you know you're going to get with Maier now, maybe this is going to change in a Dinwiddie offense, but he was very proficient at throwing the ball under 10 yards up the field. He was the one quarterback in this league that found a home making those short passes. Does Dinwiddie press him and say, look, we've got to move quickly down the field. We can't wait to do this on a 12 or a 14 play drive all the time. Burst plays, big plays, 30-yard plus passing plays. Those are the types of things that kind of flip games. Is Jake Maier going to provide that for you? He's got the decent arm, I think. But of the two, I would say Drew Brown is a better deep ball thrower. And if you're Drew Brown too, where is your head at with all of this? Because you heard rumblings that when Ryan Dinwiddie was hired, that maybe you were going to be the starting quarterback. You restructure your quarterback salary, then you get demoted on top of that. It's kind of like, I wonder if he would ever walk into the office and say, let's just trade me and get this over with.
That's a possibility, but a trade to where? At this point, teams are locked into who they see as their quarterbacks. Now, there would be a natural fit, perhaps returning to Winnipeg. We know Bryce Perkins and Taylor Algersma are not likely ready to step up into a number one quarterback role should something happen to Zach Collaros. Brown has worked with that team for a number of years as well. That could be a landing spot. I don't see the Bombers wanting to give up on Algersma at this point. I believe they think he's the quarterback of the future, but that's somewhere that he could fit in very quickly.
Then are the Blue Bombers going to pay that kind of salary? He's got a salary in excess of $300,000. You just don't want to have that taking notes. You want that person to play. This is a tough decision for Ottawa because that's a lot of money tied up in a guy that isn't seeing the field. Had Chase Bryce not played so well in the preseason, I wonder if BC would have been interested. But Chase Bryce has really cemented himself as the backup behind Nathan Rourke. That closed that door. If you're going to go after Drew Brown, you want to know that what you're getting is an upgrade from what you had. And if you're not convinced, then nobody's buying into it. And it's not to say that Drew Brown is a poor quarterback all of a sudden. It's Drew Brown has got this Zach Collaros sort of stigma about him. He gets injured a lot. Remember when Zach Collaros wound up in Winnipeg, the question was, could he survive? Could he get through another season without being on the sideline? Because, well, they believed it was concussions, but it was mainly a neck injury that was holding him up. And yet the Bombers took a chance on him, threw him in, and they went to the Grey Cup and won that year in 2019. Drew Brown could be out lightning a bottle for somebody else, or even for the Red Blacks. Let's say that Maier doesn't perform. And you're right. How long is the leash?
Big news for the Calgary Stampeders. They've announced that Jalen Hutchings has returned to the Stamps and has signed a 3-year contract. Also on that defensive line, Flo Oramolade is cleared to play. So a couple of key parts of the Stampeders defense that were gone are now back and appear to be ready to go for this week's game.
That is a massive, massive get for the Stampeders. The fact that Folarin Oramolade is back and able to play opening week in the CFL is huge, because that was an Achilles injury that took him out. And he is such a cog. You look at what the Stampeders did with him in the lineup last year, and then you look what happened to them after he went out. It's night and day. The Stampeders need a healthy Oramolade in that lineup with Jalen Hutchings in the middle. That's going to be massive. That defense is going to be scary once again. I don't know how teams are going to figure out how to get past them.
Now, both are returning from injury as well, so we'll see how quick they get up to game speed. Coach Dave Dickinson seems to think they are ready to go and will get them in the lineup as quickly as he can.
Third down.
As we mentioned off the top of the show, regular season football kicks off with 3 games this week. Game number 1 Thursday night, the Hamilton Tiger Cats host the Montreal Alouettes. The Alouettes on the road are a 1.5 point favorite in Hamilton. Who are you picking in this one?
If Davis Alexander isn't starting, I'm picking the Hamilton Tiger Cats flat out. Not only to cover, but to win. Hamilton at home, Bo Levi Mitchell has led the CFL in passing the last 2 years. He's the only quarterback that's been over 10,000 yards. Hamilton's defense could be suspect because of the changes, especially how much is they going to get from that defensive line. But their offense is primed and ready. Alouettes' defense is a little bit suspect, and how often do you say that about a Noel Thorpe defense? I like the Ticats at home.
I'm with you on this one. I think the Ticats, we know they have the longest Grey Cup drought currently running since 1999. Bo Levi Mitchell has one more good season in him for sure. I'm pretty confident in the Ticats throughout this regular season. Kenny Lawler's locked and loaded, ready to go. I like the Ticats at home, not just to cover the 1.5, but they are winning this one outright.
If you listen to Steve Daniel on our previous podcast, he brought up an interesting stat that this is the longest duration of consecutive games that Bo Levi Mitchell has played, which absolutely stuns me. But it's more than any time with the Calgary Stampeders. Now, he may have been pulled out because of end of season and they weren't going to need him because they'd already clinched. They had a lot of 15-3 records during those years. But it's fascinating to me that this is the longest stretch that he's gone consecutively as a starter with any team. Now, we move to that Calgary Stampeders. They're at home against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The Stampeders are underdogs against Winnipeg, again, a 1.5. Calgary took care of Winnipeg and Saskatchewan last year, wiped them off the map, took them out. Do you think they could do it twice? And why do you think Winnipeg is favored?
I'm not quite sure when this line came out. If it was before the Jalen Hutchings announcement, that could move the line a little bit as well. That is the big question mark for the Calgary Stampeders, is how quickly can that defense get up to speed, get those two all-stars that we talked about back in the lineup and wreaking some havoc. I do like the Bombers on the road in this one. The consistency that they have built up. Zach Collaros, through his one series, was perfect throwing the ball. Tim White has been an interesting addition to this team as well. We saw some instant chemistry between those two. Granted, again, it's a preseason game. How much do you read into that? But I like the tweaks that the Bombers have made to their lineup, and I think they come out swinging in week one here and win one on the road.
I'm going to take the home team again. I think the home team will beat the spread and probably win the game outright. Calgary at home is a tough ask. It is a bit of elevation for anybody that plays in there. But I do like the Stampeders at home. Vernon Adams Jr. is ready to go. It'll be a great matchup, him and Zach Collaros.
Game 3, Saturday, June the 6th, the Ottawa Red Blacks host the Edmonton Elks. Two of the teams that were on the outside looking in at the playoff picture last year are going to want to get off to a hot start. The Red Blacks are a 3.5 point favorite at home.
Now, this is preseason bias coming out in spades. The Elks go into BC and they win big, but they lose at home to the Calgary Stampeders. Ottawa took care of Montreal, the team that was in the Grey Cup last year. Is this enough to justify the Red Blacks being favored by 3.5? There's a lot of interpretive bias based on what Edmonton does at the beginning of the season. They go, oh, and so often. Is that playing on the minds of the betting line? I do like Ottawa at home in this football game. Something for the Edmonton Elks, and this is one thing that they have talked about incessantly in Edmonton, win the first one. So I think they're going to be a little bit uptight. They are so not necessarily afraid, but they just don't want to have to go through this 0-1, 0-2, 0-3 start that they've been facing for the last 5 years.
I like the Elks on the road in this one. The consistency of their roster, something that the Elks regime has been working very hard at, is to build that consistency. The Red Blacks, once again, bringing a lot of different pieces into the mix and trying to squeeze them all together. The Elks seem more regular season ready with what they have in place. That's why I'm taking the Elks to pull off the upset in Ottawa.
I'll disagree only because I just think that you got to factor in Ryan Dinwiddie. He knows what he's doing. Yes, he made a lot of changes, but the one thing that he needs to do is shore up that offensive line. Edmonton's in the same boat. They brought in a lot of help from Hamilton to shore up that offensive line, to improve the running game for Justin Rankin between the tackles. All that being equal, Ottawa at home. I do like the Elks on the road. I do want them to do something special to get that team going in the right direction, but it may not be Saturday night. Okay, we're on the verge of the season. Opening night is upon us. What do you think is going to happen? Let's start out west. Do you think that the Rough Riders can repeat? Do you think that the Stampeders are going to be a threat? Do the Elks get back in the playoffs, or do the BC Lions run away with it?
I don't think anybody's running away with the West this year. I do think the BC Lions are poised and ready to win the West. I have them in first place with a 12-6 record. As I said, I don't think anybody's really running away with it. Right behind them are the Saskatchewan Roughriders at 11-7. For the first time in many years, the Bombers do not have a 10-win season in them. They finish in third place, 9-9. The Edmonton Elks and Calgary Stampeders tie for fourth place at 8-10 records, with the Edmonton Elks winning that tiebreaker over Calgary, finishing fourth.
Whew. Let's face it, if Nathan Rourke is not standing at the end of the schedule, then the Lions are in trouble. If Trevor Harris is not standing at the end of the schedule, the Rough Riders are in trouble. And if Zach Collaros is not standing at the end of the schedule, then the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are in huge trouble. Do trust that Edmonton probably has less of a drop-off. Rough Riders defense took a hit. The BC Lions are trying to shore up, and having Darnell Sankey is massive for their playoff run. The Lions, to me, are the team to beat. It's a jumble as to how you figure out the rest. 8-10 as the worst record is a little generous because you're not showing much love to the East.
It is. I think this is a season, and I maybe I'm an optimist. I kind of say this every year, that this is going to be the year of parity in the CFL. You're right that all of this is dependent on quarterback health. It can drop off so drastically if something happens to your number one guy. Flipping over to the East, I think the Tiger Cats are the best team in the East this year. Again, nobody's running away. Hamilton at 11-7 is going to take first place in the East. The Alouettes at 9-9 in second place. And this is where Edmonton finishing fourth is important. The crossover does come back into play for one final season in 2026. The Elks sneak into the East with an 8-10 record. Ottawa finishes at 7-11. And Toronto is in a bit of disarray at 6-12.
I don't mind that you picked the Tiger Cats in first place, but I do think that the Alouettes are going to give them a bigger run for their money, especially if Davis Alexander is healthy, because the offense is good in Montreal and the defense will get better. Hamilton, Bo Levi Mitchell is going to be the key. He has to have a season like he did last year. They came within 30 seconds of going to the Grey Cup. That's how close they were. Ottawa, that's the question mark for me as well. 7-11, I'm not a biggest fan. I think they're going to win some games against the West this year. I think some of the Western teams are going to come down. Crossover, maybe. 26-14 was the West against the East last year. That bucked a trend from the previous 2 years where the East had actually won more games against the West. That could tip closer to maybe being a 500 proposition. And if it does, that means there's no crossover. And you're looking at Toronto and or Ottawa finding that third place. And I'm not sure which one to go, but it's just a question of what does Chad Kelly bring back to the table? And does Ottawa with Jake Maier, or is it Drew Brown? Do they find their way immediately? You think back to when Ryan Dinwiddie took over the Argonauts, they immediately shot up in the standings. This is something that I think he can have that kind of effect on the Red Blacks. The East, to me, is going to be really tight. It could be 3 wins between first and fourth, but I don't think there's going to be a crossover.
It's so hard to tell when you start putting pen to paper and start trying to justify these standings. It's a very difficult task, especially with the way the balanced schedule works now, where you're playing everybody twice. you get that head-to-head against every team in the league, that home and home, and you really see where you stack up. As I said, I wanted to get this into place. I didn't see anybody running away at a 14-4 record or a 15-3 this year. It's going to be a lot tighter than that. You've got to factor in some of those losses, and I just think Toronto is taking a big step back. Chad Kelly's got a lot of rust. They have to get him back up to game speed from a very, very serious leg injury, and I think the slow start is what's going to hurt them and keep them out of playoff contention.
Consider, too, that the Argonauts are not playing at home, technically, until August. The BC Lions are playing 2 games in Kelowna, which is closer to home. Much tougher road for the Argonauts, but if they ever find a way through it, watch out, because then they'll be at home and with all those games loaded up. The Lions, it's all about Nathan Rourke and his health. Chase Bryce may take a week or two and figure it out, but if the Lions get off to, and let's face it, that game, opening night, Saskatchewan and BC, that's week 2 in the season, but that's opening night for each of those. Rematch of the West Final. Whoever walks away with that may walk away with the West.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.